Hey there. Thanks for being with me on the Listen for Real podcast. I'm Jennifer Brown. My guests today are Shannon Curtis and Jamie Hill. And let me just tell you a quick bit about them. Shannon is a songwriter and performer, and Jamie is a music producer and engineer. And together they actually host their own weekly podcast called Misfit Stars. And we're talking today about beliefs, identity, and the strange, wonderful journey I'm on with all of you to get outside of the echo chamber. For now, come and join me in this conversation, and thanks for being part of this real community. So here's what's so great about the fact that we're talking in your kitchen. So I'm on the road. I'm up here in, can I say where you're from? Or is that super squirrel secret? Or
we're real public.
You're real public. So I'm up in Tacoma, Washington with Shannon and Jamie for the weekend. And we are accomplishing a number of things. My son and I are here having a great time. But we're recording a podcast, and it's so appropriate because these two have inspired much of why this podcast is even in existence.
Woohoo! That's so cool.
It is. It is. So here we are. And I think it's so interesting that this subject has taken form based on conversations we've been having over the last few days. And I think me and my wrestling with my personal struggles and identity is now that's made it the topic of this podcast.
Awesome.
Which is kind of interesting because now looking back at your podcast this week, shameless plug, Misfit Stars.
Yeah,
great
right.
podcast, everybody.
You can find it at misfitstars.com. Thanks.
I love that you did that. Thank you.
Hashtag branding.
Excellent. No, but you guys talked about identity this week. And as I was jotting down my notes about our conversation, I think you actually had a podcast on this topic. Probably went a little different direction this week. So really quick, you want to just say what your podcast was this week in
sure.
2 sentences?
Yeah. Well, we do, our podcast is Jamie and me in conversation each week with each other about stuff that matters to us.
And never anybody else, just the two of us.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
We're not sick of each other at all.
No.
But we also take listener topics in our podcast.
Yes.
And so last week's podcast was mostly in part informed by a topic that one of our listeners suggested that they wanted to hear us talk about. And the question was about our listener asked, what beliefs of yours have changed over the course of your life? And he wasn't really talking about like religious or philosophical beliefs, but more beliefs about ourselves, the beliefs that we have about others. And
Core
beliefs about right and wrong, things like that.
Yeah.
And so we got to dive into that on our podcast this week, which was it was a good conversation.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit. Want to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to say, I'm looking across the table and I got to give you all a visual. They're just this precious couple. They're about 4 inches from one another's face. They could practically make out right now and you wouldn't even know about it. I would know. But
just quiet little make out noises. I'm real close on the mic.
Gross.
No, because I put the foam on the microphone so we would never know. No, but they're just awesome. And I love it. They even can manage a microphone beautifully together. It's so fun. I was thinking about identity and my dearly held beliefs. And Shannon, you and I were talking about this last night, that I suddenly had this epiphany, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been growing over these last 9-10 months, that I have had this identity my entire adult life that I have been clinging to and was so sure, well, this is who I am.
Mm.
And then it occurred to me in these I'd say in the last 9-10 months, maybe last year, that isn't actually even accurate.
It's wild.
Isn't that weird? And so I realized, like, for example, if I said to you, and I did this at the beginning of my Real Conversation speaker series, is I said to everyone in the audience, look, I want to talk to people who are different from myself. I want to hear about the experiences and what other people find as real in their life and experience. And as we all know, I want to get out of the echo chamber. I want to get out of how I think. I don't want to sit any longer and marinate in what I think. A, it's way too limited. And B, I just want a wider paradigm. And I said to my audience, if you are here to listen to a white, middle-aged American, conservative, Christian, and I kind of named all my labels, then you're really in the wrong place, because that's not who I want to talk to. I want something opposite or different from that. I would say different than that. And then I realized, okay, yes, I am white if you look at me. All right. But I happen to be American. I am sort of middle-aged. But see, when you take those three, for example, those are just descriptors, but they do sort of put you into they have their own implications. To someone say you're a white middle-aged American has its own implications, is what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah.
But then even I can be a global citizen, still love the fact and feel honored that I happen to be born in America. And there's a lot of great privileges that come with that.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing. And I feel, I guess, a sense of pride in that. I don't know. I'm not going to flesh that out right now. I can totally love God and decide, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, but I don't really identify necessarily really with being a Christian. And I did that with my little air quotes, because you hear that term and you think, oh, evangelical or Christian, and you immediately begin with associations that if you talk to me and understood who I hang out with, what I do, what I value, people I want to spend my time with, it doesn't mesh. It doesn't fit. So does that really fit me, so to speak? And then, even educated upper middle class. What is that even? But I think I've had all these identities and they're getting slowly dismantled. And I think that's great. But what I said to you last night or this morning was there's fear for me in suddenly departing from perhaps my deeply held beliefs.
Totally.
And it's very vulnerable. I feel like I'm being laid bare. And then I had this scary feeling of, what if someone presents to me an idea that doesn't fit or jive with my dearly held beliefs? And that, it made me choke up to think. That challenged me. But I don't want to live any other way either. So do you see my paradox? So riff off that. Thank you, Jamie.
Do you want to riff first? Yeah, I listening to you describe this moment in which you're in your life. Like, I feel so much, I can relate to you a lot. I think there have been like probably a few different inflection points in my life in which I have felt that same, what I'm hearing you describe as sort of like being on the precipice of being challenged, being changed, being open, and it's scary as can be, and yet also at the very same time feeling like I don't want to go back.
Right.
And so this is this tension between like knowing what it is that I'm after in my life. I want the challenge. I want the new. I want to discover more and deeper parts of myself, and coming to the realization that I recognize that that's going to really challenge the status quo in my life. It's coming to terms with what I'm bargaining for in stepping into that discovery. And like, we all have a choice, right? We all have a choice when we come to those moments. Sometimes they're big moments and sometimes they're just small moments. We all have a choice of what to do. We can turn around from the precipice and walk back to what's comfortable, what's known, what's familiar to us, how other people know us, what the way things have been. Or we can take a step off of that ledge and wait for the bridge to appear like Indiana Jones, and see what comes next. And I don't know. I think I spent a lot of my life really fearing that precipice. I think I spent a lot of my life really needing to stay in the safe place. What I learned about what compromises I was willing to do in order to stay in the safe place was that those compromises led me personally to a place of some severe loss of my identity as I gave it away to others, what others wanted from me. And for me, it also those compromises led me to a place of what ended up being a pretty dark depression.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I even though it is scary to be challenged, to have the structures on which my life has been hung forever, dismantled, as terrifying as that might be, every time I've allowed that to happen in my life, I've been rewarded so greatly with a new and deeper sense of knowing myself, of experiencing life, like really, and getting to just discover new things about the world that I had kept myself shut off from in the past, and deeper relationships with others, a deeper sense of compassion. Like there's so many benefits,
Yes.
but it's never not hard,
Right.
to go through that transformation.
Yeah, I think it is so easy to run back to the safe embrace of what's known, what's comfortable, what is acceptable in your own mind, what you've kind of established as your little safe zone. Yeah, I just don't want to run back to that.
Yeah,
I'm still wrestling with this. And I think this entire journey of this podcast, and really that's partly the point of this podcast, I'm realizing, is that there are other people on this journey who are suddenly realizing, oh, I always just assumed blah, blah, blah. I always just presumed this, that, or the other. And wait a minute, there's more in perhaps my belief system. There's more. I struggle to even put words to it. I think I struggle with acknowledging, oh, does that mean my last 20 years have been wrong? You follow?
I do.
Does that mean, and I don't believe that to be the case. Like some people say,
also, me too.
I'm divorced and remarried. I don't look back, and never have, and never would look back at that relationship and go, oh, that should have never happened to that. No, I'm grateful for it. Absolutely. And so I don't look back and feel sadness or remorse, but I can see things I've just missed. I missed a lot because I was just so myopic and focused in this one direction, or this was the only way this could possibly be true or right or good. And that's really limited.
Let me ask you a question, Jem.
Okay.
Do you think that the journey you're describing generally, to which you and Shannon have both spoken, is necessarily a journey from conservatism and away from that? From a conservative outlook and approach to life toward a more small L, liberally minded worldview, a more expansive worldview? Like, does this same journey ever happen in reverse? Does it ever happen that someone's like, I have thought too many things and been too open-minded, and I must get rid of that and narrow my focus in my life?
Right. You're right. Well, and so, see, it's hard because the minute I hear conservative and liberal, I start to attach political meaning. So it's almost like I need two different words for that.
Definitely.
So first, I think, so I got to separate those first. I think, because if I would have looked at, let's use the political thing for a minute. I'm not so sure I was ever all that conservative, but I identified, because of where I was in my life, my certain aspects of the trappings of my life,
Your social group,
my setup of everything lent to, oh, well, that's kind of the people I'm around, or the circles I'm running in, or the county I live in, or the church I go to, or the school I attend, right? The job work I'm in, lent to being more conservative. But deep down, if you look at the way I was raised very, very liberally, very all are welcome. This is
right.
All, yeah. So ask me your question again, Jamie, because now I feel like I had to separate it from that because that's where my brain went the minute you asked it. Was it the journey from being a conservative person to a more liberal, let's say, progressive minded person from a viewpoint and political standpoint? And I know
To
you're
get
asking
politics
a bigger,
out of it, I would maybe couch it more as from narrow-minded to open-minded.
Okay.
Right? Does anyone ever does this journey ever happen in the reverse, where someone consciously says to themselves, I really need to become more narrow-minded?
No,
I have seen in my life examples of people who have over time become more narrow-minded, but I do not think that was intentional. I don't think that if you asked them about it, they would say this is something that I have set out to do, or even that I have done. I don't think anyone ever thinks of themselves as being a narrow-minded person, right? But people can indeed set out on an intentional journey of becoming more open-minded, which seems to be the one you're describing.
You're correct. And I would say I didn't think I was narrow-minded. So there's been an awareness in branching out and speaking to other people and realizing I was wrong on certain things I thought or assertions I made or misled, however you want to look at it. And then I realized, whoa, I have been very narrow-minded on some levels. And you're right. The journey, I think that comes though sometimes with maturity. Don't you feel like with age, not always, not with everybody.
It's not a given.
No, it isn't like, but to me, that's when they say, oh, you gain wisdom as you age. I think wisdom is realizing there's a whole different perspective here. And it's not just this, it's this.
I don't know, though. I mean, that's the ideal, right? But like all of us have examples of very close and dear family members who have made precisely the reverse journey.
You're right.
Right? Whose heads have just disappeared up their backsides with age.
Yes, you're right.
But I think what you're describing though is the fact though that this journey toward a more open-minded or open-hearted or whatever, broadening one's vision, expanding the perspective is really kind of it sort of is an active choice. You know, like it doesn't just happen. That's not like it's not like that's just going to naturally be the course of things in a human's life. And I can really only speak to my own experience. Like I know for me, like one of the biggest inflection points in my life came as a result of me realizing that I either could not go on living the way that I was because my small world had sort of collapsed in on itself to a place where I just emotionally couldn't survive it anymore. You know, it became a life or death situation for me, you know? So we each reach a place, I think, where we either understand a need for change in our lives. Like there's a desperate choice here to be made, you know, like coasting anymore was not really an option for me any longer at that place in my life. Right. Yeah. I had to make a choice. Like, do I just stay in this closed world? And for me, that was just not going to be an option because I was so depressed, you know, or do I set out on something new? Do I take this risk? Do I take this leap? But it was a choice. And I think it's a choice for all of us. Like
it is.
We come to those crisis moments, and we get to decide what to do.
Well, and I want to be clear. This isn't about, this isn't about me sounding so enlightened, like, oh, I'm going to have this podcast where I talk to people with different experiences because I'm just so enlightened now and I want to have a broader mindset and expand my paradigm. I just genuinely dig people. I love meeting new people. I love learning new things. I love hearing their perspective, even when it's sometimes hard and it makes me want to cry or it challenges me and it kind of rocks me to my core.
Yeah.
I dig people and their magic and their beauty, and they're so unique and they're so different. And so then to not avail myself of all these cool people on this planet around me seems crazy. So part of it is just out of, wow, I really enjoy people. And I want to selfishly suck all of this marrow life out.
Totally.
So that kind of goes back to the question Jamie asked me, and hopefully that answers it in a very strangely circular way. I don't know. That's that one. Is this where we take a break?
Sure.
And play music?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, you could do that.
Let's play some music.
See you guys in a sec.
Hey, so welcome back. This is great. We left off, one of the things we were talking about was belief and our identities and belief systems. So I have a couple questions for you.
Ooh, I
Are
can't
you guys
wait.
ready?
So ready.
Okay. And I learned this, let me tell you, because I got to give credit where credit is due. One of the things I do is I lead Women Speak circles, and it's where women come together and define their message, dig deep, look for it, discover their own voice, and then assert it more powerfully.
How cool.
And one of the things, one of the curriculums that Casey Baker, who is the founder of Women Speak, put together was this concept of sharing what you believe. And she turned it into something really simple. And it was write, I believe, ... and finish the sentence. And then I believe, ... finish the sentence. And it could be about anything. So my question for you two is, what do you believe? So give me any of your sentences. I believe ... So I thought it might be fun to do a few of these. What do you think?
Oh, heck yeah.
I'm game.
Okay. So what do you believe about people?
Ooh, that's a good one. Do you want to go first, sweetheart?
No, do you want to go?
I can go.
Okay, you go.
I just didn't want to step on you. And this is something that I've been evolving, and I wrestle with a lot, but I think that I believe, let me start it the proper way, as per your format. I believe that people are essentially and inherently good, given the chance to be so.
Hold on. Given the chance to be so was the game changer there.
That's a really good, a good qualifier, which makes for, that's interesting. So mine's not all that far off from yours. I believe that people, by and large, are doing their best.
Mm-hmm. Cosign.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the best isn't all that great.
Yeah.
But you know,
but then again, according to whose standard, right?
Exactly. Well, sometimes what my best is to offer, is maybe not all that great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still my best at that moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yep. And even in my, I think that what you just said is a great exercise in empathy. And it's something I think about a lot personally, that person who is just being an asshole in the grocery, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They are doing their best in that moment.
Yeah. That may be all they have.
And it's really instructive to think about what is going on for them, that is their best right now, Mm-hmm. And it can really shift how you think about a situation, because you don't need to take any of that negativity on yourself. It doesn't have to be about you, right? Because when you're finding yourself getting angry about someone being an a-hole in the grocery, it's because of something in your ego that you're bringing to that situation. And you can really make situations be not about you a lot more, which can be really helpful and valuable. And you can just start to think about what's going on for them, and how can I maybe in this moment, is there a way I can lighten their load? Mm-hmm. Is there a way I could help them turn that around a little tiny bit? Maybe I could be a bright face for them. Maybe I could be a little bit of positive energy that might not fix them for right now, but maybe it would incrementally help make them a little bit better. And what if a bunch of people did that for them?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll add mine then.
Oh, yeah.
I believe people are incredibly valuable and worthy of dignity, and are just a work of art.
I like it.
Creative, unique, just incredibly precious.
Yeah.
And they bring something no one else does to this existence, to this planet, to life. And people are worthy of being heard, seen, experienced, felt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's mine for people.
I like it.
Ready for another?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're fighting for the microphone, ladies and gentlemen, because these are the compelling questions Jennifer Brown will bring to you in any episode of this amazing podcast.
Right?
That's what we show up for. That's why we're here.
It's a new Fight Club style podcast show called Two Guests, One Mic.
I like that. I believe
What's the topic?
goodness.
What do we believe about goodness? Oh, boy.
Well, I had to go first last time.
Dang it.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. You go first.
Is that just... I believe there is goodness in holding someone able. And when I use that phrase, it's very specific. And
What does it mean?
It's a phrase Susan Scott of Fierce. She wrote the book Fierce Conversations, Fierce Leadership. She's fabulous. She uses this in her book, so I cannot take credit. You hold someone able, it's really holding them with a belief and an expectation that they can be more. So there's times people aren't living necessarily up to that, but you know the incredible gift of potential that lies within them. And so sometimes it's about holding them able. It could be so simple as, let's say, as a parent, do I jump in and try and fix everything and do everything and be that curling parent who goes before my kid to make the ice smooth so that they go further?
What a great image.
Right. Oh, well, that's the term they use in Denmark, actually. It's
nice because
the
it
curling
implies
parent.
that your kid is like a slow moving disaster.
Well, sometimes.
And you go before them and you're with your little broom and you're like, yeah. So anyway, we digress, but I believe holding people able is one of the best gifts we can give them. And that is a form of goodness.
Oh, interesting.
That's completely different than probably what you were expecting.
Well, no, it actually helps me sort of like focus a belief of mine about goodness, I think. Because I think that, I mean, you're talking about this as it relates to relationship, with others. And I think in that respect, it is that I believe that, could I say it is good? Because it's hard to formulate a sentence.
Yeah.
Or that maybe that goodness. Oh, this is tough. I'm so sorry.
know.
I'm having trouble like formulating the sentence. I like your concept of holding others able, and I think that a corollary for me in that is that I believe that there's goodness in allowing others to. There's goodness in being responsible for myself and allowing others to be responsible for themselves. And when I say that, I'm imagining this concept that I talk about a lot, which is there being my side of the street and your side of the street in any relationship or interaction. And that me really taking responsible for my side of it is good. And me allowing you to really take responsibility or not for your side is good.
Well, and let me play off of that because I used to think goodness was the opposite. If I did this for you, if I fixed this for you,
Right.
and which is not necessarily goodness, but I used to think and operate out of, oh, that's being a good person. That's
Right,
being
right.
good. And so this is really almost the opposite.
And I think to really bring it back to like the theme here is like, I'm only responsible for my own goodness, right? I'm not responsible for yours or anyone else's in my life.
Meaning goodness in how you treat others.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I'm not responsible for making anyone else be good. I only get to do that for me.
Yeah. Want to add anything, James?
I do. I mean, we each get one, right?
You do.
All right, cool. Mine is that I believe that goodness is absolute, not relative. And what I mean by that is, I guess I'm holding it in my mind sort of parallel with the idea of moral relativism, which is just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. The idea that when you get right down to what it is to be truly good towards somebody, perhaps, or just in your own self, that it should be something that stands up at any time in any period if it is truly good, right? I'm thinking, for example, about the ways that women were treated in the 50s. There was an entirely different sort of level of what was socially acceptable for a man to say to a woman. And much of it was a catastrophe, just horribly misogynistic, sexist, demeaning, right? And it was just sort of accepted at the time because, quote unquote, that's how things were. But I think that it's really important to understand the idea that just because you can do something doesn't mean that it's okay for you to do that thing. And I think that that's an absolute.
So you're saying like you can't like lift a conversation out of the 1950s in which someone was saying some horrible sexist thing about a woman or a woman's place in the world or whatever, and even though it was acceptable at that time, it still doesn't make it. It was still not good, even at that time in which it was acceptable.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, the idea that people should have known better. And that's, I think, instructive to apply to our times too, right? Like, I think it's really important to examine constantly the ways in which we're acting and the standards that we're upholding in our interactions with other people and like the standards to which we're holding ourselves. Because I think that sometimes some of that stuff really crumbles under even the slightest scrutiny, right? Just because you have been taught something, just because you have been raised in a certain way, does not mean it's okay, does not mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad either. It just means that I think it's incumbent upon us to constantly evaluate and assess where we're at and try to be a better version of ourselves in just sort of more of an absolute way, Just because you have a past, culturally speaking, based on where you live or who you are, to treat another group of people a certain way, does not make it okay. It just means that it's something that you, for some reason, feel like you're allowed to do.
And to your point, then, we don't want to necessarily learn this by the 40 years later hindsight.
Right.
You're saying what we don't want is 40 years from now, looking back, oh my word, we want to do the introspection if possible. Do the work right now. But what is doing the work? What does doing the work look like?
You want to know what I think it looks like?
Yeah.
Doing this podcast.
Oh, good point.
Like this, the questions you're asking, the journey you're setting yourself on in gathering other people's experiences and looking at them in an open-hearted way to expand your own perspective and your own mind. I think that's how we do the work. We listen more than we talk. And we listen with compassion and an open heart for people's humanity. Like I think and we talked about this on our podcast this past week about like our core beliefs, some of them. And I think that I used to think that what was right and wrong was defined by some code that someone else had written that I was supposed to learn and abide by.
Yes.
That it was something outside of me that I just needed to, okay, there's the rules. I got to follow them. Yes. Right, wrong. There we go. I no longer believe that because I believe what I believe about how I arrive at a decision about what's right and what's wrong is getting really still with myself, getting really honest with myself, allowing myself to be sort of steeped in compassion for myself and others as I'm evaluating what's right. I think that there's this bell that rings in us that is true. And we know what that sounds like. I think we can know what that sounds like. But I think so part of that work is getting to that place of being able to listen to what is resonant, even if it's hard truth. I believe we can hear that when we get still, Yeah.
I've got a further idea on this too. Something I've noticed, we travel a lot because we do music and we spend a lot of time in a lot of different kinds of communities. And something I've noticed is that in my experience, there's a lot fewer bigots in diverse places, right? And the lesson that I've taken from that is that when you know someone, it's much harder to be prejudiced toward them.
Yes.
And I think what you can extrapolate from that is the more you fill your head with ideas, the harder it is to be closed-minded.
Yeah. 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 I was thinking about that very thing this morning is for many years, I was trying to protect whether it's my kids, like we talked about how upbringing.
Yeah.
and okay, well, you shouldn't be exposed to these ideas or this music or whatever it is, right? Because that might what?
Give you too many ideas.
Right.
Ideas are dangerous.
Right. And is that whole...
Was it a religiously based thing? Like it's going to draw them further away from God or whatever? Like what's the fear at the center of that? Because it sounds like a fear-based thing.
Yeah. I think for me, it was more religiously based. Yes. It was for example, here's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
I, many years ago, looked at recovery, but I thought, oh, well, I happen to be a Christian. I can only go to Celebrate Recovery. Right?
Which is the church sanctioned version of 12-step recovery.
12-step recovery.
Right.
For anyone who's not familiar, so recovery, like outside of church, is typically, it takes the form of a 12-step program. And there are just 12-step programs literally have 12 steps. It's a program that you do in order. You do 1, 2, 3 through 12. And you do them in order, and someone who has done them before you mentors you through them. And Celebrate Recovery is the same 12 steps, but everything is reframed in New Testament terms.
Right. Exactly. And so I thought to myself, well, that is the only way I could possibly pursue this because it needs to be right in my lane. I need to stay in my lane. Yeah. It needs to be in my lane. And Celebrate Recovery is a great thing and has brought recovery to many, many people.
Yes.
But it was only in the recent year that I've entered the rooms of 12-step that was not through Celebrate Recovery, but just normal 12-step rooms. Mm-hmm. And so it's not sanctioned New Testament, and there are all kinds of higher powers present there, correct? And it's been a very, very rich experience, but I'm so thankful. I would have missed it. So my time in Celebrate Recovery was very good. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was at the time. And now I'm realizing, no, there's much to be gained here. And I don't, just because that's my lane, doesn't mean that's where I have to stay. I think I thought if I go to a normal room, well, then I'm going to hear from all these people who don't believe in God, let's say. Well, that wouldn't be good because I believe in God. Do you see how limited?
Yes.
I
relate to this very much because I think I had a similar path in my life regarding religion. And I thought that it was threatening to my declared faith earlier in my life to entertain ideas that weren't sanctioned by that faith.
Yeah.
That I relate to that.
Well, and what's so interesting is my belief in God and the richness and the lens through which I see God has become richer and better in the last 9-10 months.
Pretty cool.
In the non-sanctioned, my lane version. So, and that's, again, not to say that somebody's not having a rich experience with their God in CR.
Yeah.
But, and it does not to say you come into the 12-step rooms and you have this rich experience with God. But for me, isn't that interesting that I was trying to be so protective of this, and it only got richer and deeper and far greater and expansive to go, wow, God's amazing in the way that he loves and speaks to people so differently. And it takes so many different shapes and forms. And I really thought everything was all like, it's your morning quiet time, like we talked about last night.
It's almost as though you're saying that a truly robust faith can withstand scrutiny.
That's exactly the point. And that is the reality I honestly landed on this morning at this table was, Jen, if what your ethos is truly real and true to who you are, then doing these podcasts and talking to different people who have a different belief system altogether is not a threat to that. If anything, it's going to be richer, deeper, better. Or it'll help you synthesize, oh, that's why I believe this. Or, there's no merit to what I'm believing there at all. It's
what I think about when I think about stuff like this? I think about like when kids want to form a band, they're like 18 or 19 or whatever, and they want to express themselves and they love X style of music. And so they only listen to X style of music and they only work on making X style of music. And invariably, it seems that people who have like a very narrow view of what sort of music is acceptable for them to consume and to emulate, it sounds regurgitated. It sounds boring to me. And it seems like when people embrace a whole wide variety of art forms and different takes on, let's say in this example, music, that they still might want to make X style of music, but if they listen to W, X, Y, and Z styles, when they make X, it will be much more interesting because it's informed by them having to defend their own belief system against other ways of doing something.
Or sometimes incorporate parts of others that jive,
Yes.
you know, or that complement
Yeah.
Exactly
where
right.
they started from, you know?
Yes. Yeah, because I don't want it to, what I keep saying, I don't want it to be just limited to this little, this is, there's so much more out there and the little pieces of other people. It's like this beautiful tapestry you picture woven together, and different people and inputs and experiences create this wonderful, rich, colorful, varied art form.
Yeah.
And it would be just depleted and dry, and
Be ashamed to miss out on all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would. Okay, did we cover all of our belief statements? So, oh no, that's the next question.
What is it?
God and the universe, life, the ethos, it's not the ethos. It's, what's that word? Ether. I believe ... about God, the universe, life, form, whatever you want. The
I can
divine.
take this one.
Okay.
I think to put it in context, I have to say to your listeners, because they don't know me, but I grew up in a conservative religious upbringing. And so my idea of what God was defined for me by others
Okay.
in a younger part of my life. And when I was 30, I left the church and didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For my own complicated set of reasons. And then I landed in 12-step recovery.
Mm.
And one of the first things they ask you to do there is to identify a higher power. And I'm like, what the actual F? Because I just got done with all this. I don't want that. I just said I didn't want a higher power.
Yeah.
And yet there was a compelling reason for me to figure that out, because I was in those rooms with people who clearly had the kind of serenity in their lives that I desperately needed. And so I dedicated myself to trying to figure out what that could look like for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to this understanding then, and it has been expanded upon in experiences over and over and over, from, you know, our shared music experiences with people that we give, you know, when we do house concerts, to frankly, this conversation right now, is the idea that I believe that if it is to be called God, whatever that force is something that exists between us humans, and frankly, maybe even nature, when we engage intentionally with one another. There's an undeniable electricity to me, and a surging of energy that occurs when you and I intentionally engage with one another around topics of the heart, about things that matter, about ways in which we're feeling vulnerable, or, you know, like that's where, to me, that's where I believe God exists.
I love
Even
that.
if I still have trouble calling it God because of my own personal history. But that's what I believe.
Yeah. You want to go, James?
Yeah, sure. So, little background for listeners. I grew up in Vermont, where there's not really religion in the same way that people understand it in the rest of the country. I grew up in New England, which is a pretty agnostic place, and I grew up in Vermont, which is the most agnostic part of that most agnostic place. And it's funny because Vermont is dotted, as anyone who has ever seen a calendar knows, with little white church steeples poking out from among, you know, alternately greenery or foliage, depending on the nature of the calendar. And it's tempting to think that it would be a very religious place, but really they function much more as meeting houses, as sort of community centers, if that makes sense. Like, I went to a church basement every day after school because it was across the street, but it wasn't like it was church basement. It was just a basement in a building where people also met on Sunday and did stuff, you know, but again, kind of more in a secular way, you know, everything's sort of, I don't know, what would you call it, Shannon, congregational in nature, maybe? I don't know. So I don't have a background in religion. I've never had one. And I'm deeply skeptical the older I get, increasingly skeptical, I should say, the older I get about religion. It's problematic at best. And it seems like it's the cause of most of the bad things in the world. So, with that as context and preamble, I believe that God is a personal concept and that it's most useful as a metaphor. I believe that God is best spelled with a small g. And that I also believe that it's not mandatory that one should have a concept of God. That perhaps it's for a lot of people healthier not to. I believe that people's lives can be ruined by being forced to try to adopt someone else's concept of God. And I believe that with all that said, there's something going on. But also that it's not a monotheistic deity that can be embodied in a single person-like figure. But perhaps it's more physics-based in nature or energetic. Perhaps there's a quantum entanglement or some other physical manifestation that we just don't quite understand yet and may never, unless the aliens give us that information too.
I really hope there are aliens.
That's awesome.
It would be pretty egotistical to think we're the only thing out there.
It's true.
Yeah, it would. Oh, this is so rich. And what I find wonderful and amazing is that right here, even at this table, so this would be I believe. I believe God is in everything. And so the energy, the spirit that's at this table, he is in everything. He works through everything, even through. So for me, I'm sitting here with my dear, good, wonderful friend I adore and love, Jamie, who just said, I don't believe in this God. And yet it is possible that the way I'm seeing and experiencing God is through yet even someone who goes, it's kind of like, I have a hard time saying it, but it's someone who says, it's not there, but yet it worked right through that.
The not there-ness.
Yeah, the not there-ness. But that's so cool to me. And that's what's so big and expansive and amazing is this energy that can I experience God on an island if it was just me and God? I believe I probably could, but for me, I experience it in and through other people.
Yeah.
Regardless of what their belief system is.
Right.
Like some of the most amazing experiences I've had of God or with God are in this type of setting right here. So it wasn't because I was necessarily in the lane again.
Yeah.
Sitting in, let's say, church or something. Not that I haven't had spiritual moments there too.
Yeah. And you touched on something that's interesting for me. So I read some Zen Buddhism every day. I just get a little thing in my email. It's just it's a nice idea to have recurring in your life on a little tiny basis once a day for me.
Yeah.
And an idea that I've sort of picked up from there is that the idea of God there, or one idea of God, if you could even call it that, is not of a presence, but of an absence. That you are the closest to God when your mind is completely empty. Like the goal of meditation, right, which is like a huge focus in that tradition, is to completely empty your mind so that there is nothing there but empty space. And that's the most spiritual you can be.
Wow. Because is it the emptying? Because I truly don't I don't know much about this concept. Are you saying then the emptiness is allowing for room for something to be downloaded?
No, it's not making space for something to come bludgeon its way in. It is just, the emptiness is the point. It's not emptiness as preparation. It's emptiness as end goal. The true nature of mind is like a cloudless sky.
Is that even possible?
Well, I always think of things like this as, I don't know if anyone out there knows any math, but like if you think about like 8th grade, like algebra, if you think about how 1 over x squared looks, if you plot it out, it's a curve that never quite reaches the y-axis going up and never quite reaches the x-axis going out, right? It infinitely approaches, but never quite gets there. And I think maybe it's like that.
Shannon.
No, see, here's what I'm thinking.
Because this is so heady. My brain wants to pop.
Totally. As I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking like the word acceptance came to my mind. The word the idea of approaching that emptiness. The more you approach that emptiness, the less ego there is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's what I'm getting from your description of this, is that it's less of me and what I think of me or what I think of things in general.
Yes.
And more acceptance of what is, of all that what is.
Yeah.
They have a word for that thing that you're talking about, and it's grasping. Less grasping. The idea is to completely minimize grasping.
That's really interesting.
So that's where surrender. See, I immediately thought the word surrender when you said less grasping. Surrender is picture open hands versus a grasping hand.
Yeah.
An open hand is just surrendered and accepts what comes to it.
So now I think to extend that metaphor, imagine it's not an open hand, but imagine you have no hands. Dude.
I can't. Okay. I'm going to think on that one.
It's a good exercise.
It really is. But then I think about, and I go back to, because my framework is God.
Sure.
And I go back to emptying myself so that there's more of him and the goodness that I believe is him. Let's say him, love and goodness and all that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's less of me, then it's more of what he and I are together, this sort of co-created experience. Again, hard to explain. Will I ever be able to talk on a podcast when I can't even articulate? But it doesn't matter, because people, you guys in the audience, I know you're thinking the same thing. Like, wow, how do we even put that into words? Well, sometimes we just can't. Some things cannot be put into words. This is one of those for me.
Mm-hmm. It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. We probably should wrap up.
Thanks for a great conversation.
It's been really good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you guys. And I appreciate that way you push me and expand my brain and mind. And you've caused me to take pause. That's leaving room and space. When there is a pause, there is so much room for other things. And I just have learned a lot, and I love being challenged, and I love deepening relationships and friendships. And that's what these conversations are about as well. So thank you.
Well, same. And thank you too for being on the path, for being one of the people out there who's trying to learn and trying to expand your mind. It's how people should be.
Thanks.
Glad you're in our lives.
Thanks, guys. You're awesome.
You too.
You too.
See you later.
See ya.
What a great conversation. As my wrap up, I have to say, I always go into a conversation with someone and a podcast episode with something on my brain or an expectation of how I think it's going to go. And then I always come away with something new and different. And I've got to say, talking with Shannon and Jamie, I'm just learning I don't need to be afraid of the fact that learning new perspectives does not automatically invalidate any previous beliefs or ethics. I think I've been in this mindset of, if I explore new things, even though I say this is what I believe and this is what I want to do, and I really want to flesh things out and get into the nitty gritty conversations with people and hear more from somebody who's totally different than myself. If I'm going to be honest, sometimes that makes me really nervous and really, I guess anxious is the word. And that's, I don't need to have fear about that. That's just silly. And I'm always richer for having heard someone's perspective. And when it's different from mine, it's not a threat. And I think we get in this mindset. Maybe it's the culture. I'm not sure that somehow if somebody's mindset is different, or if you have not converted them to your own belief or to your own way of thinking, that something is somehow wrong. And that's just not the case. So I learned also I need to get out of performance mode when I talk with people, or sounding or saying the right thing. Sometimes you just need to talk authentically about what you're thinking or what you're grappling with. And this is the journey, no doubt, that I'm on with this podcast. And I'm so grateful you guys are joining me. And I love being in conversation with you. And I'm excited. So thanks so much for being here today. Listen for Real is produced in Rocklin, California, and is edited and mixed with the help of Marky B. Our music, entitled Zero, is created and performed by the amazing Shannon Curtis. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we will see you next time.